Blood soaked into Virginia soil that morning, the same soil where two brothers once played as children. Now, one wore blue, the other, gray. What makes a man aim his rifle at someone who shares his blood? You've heard about the Civil War, the numbers, the battles, the politics. But have you heard about the Terrell brothers? About how William and James stood on opposite sides at Manassas? About how their mother received two letters that Christmas, one from a Union general, one from a Confederate colonel, both her sons. The dawn broke cold on April 12, 1861, Fort Sumter, the first shots. But in thousands of American homes, the real war had already begun. Around dinner tables, in churches, between fathers and sons, between brothers who'd sworn to protect each other. Picture this moment. A young man, barely 20, stares at his brother across a kitchen table in Kentucky. The same table where they'd shared countless meals. The same brother who'd taught him to ride, to shoot, to be a man. Now they're shouting. Now they're choosing sides. Now one is packing his bags for the North, the other for the South. "I'll see you when this is over," one says. "If we both survive," the other replies. They both know the truth, neither will speak. The Civil War wasn't just blue versus gray. It was neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend, blood against blood. In border states like Kentucky, Maryland, and Missouri, families literally tore themselves apart. Can you imagine Christmas morning 1862? Empty chairs at tables, mothers who didn't know if their sons were alive, fathers who'd disowned their own children for their choice of uniform. This is the story they don't tell you in history books. The story of how America didn't just split along the Mason-Dixon line. It split through living rooms, through hearts, through the very soul of what it means to be family. The numbers are staggering. Over 600,000 dead. But here's what those numbers don't tell you. In Franklin County, Pennsylvania, the Skelly brothers chose different armies. At Gettysburg, they died within a mile of each other. Neither knew the other had fallen. You think you know tragedy? Imagine Mary Lincoln. Yes, that Mary Lincoln. Her half-brothers fought for the Confederacy. While her husband led the Union, she mourned rebels. The White House itself was a house divided. The border states became a special kind of hell. In Missouri, it wasn't North versus South. It was Thompson versus Thompson, Miller versus Miller. Fathers leading Union militias while their sons rode with Confederate guerrillas. This wasn't distant, abstract war. This was personal. This was intimate. This was hatred born from love betrayed. Look at the story of the Crittenden family. The father, John Crittenden, desperately tried to hold the Union together through compromise. His son George became a Confederate general. His son Thomas became a Union general. They fought in the same battles, Stones River. The father's compromise failed. His sons met on the battlefield. Are you my enemy now? How many brothers asked this question? How many couldn't answer? The wounded filled the hospitals, Union and Confederate side by side. And sometimes, God help them, sometimes they recognized the face in the next bed. Letters from this period are heartbreaking. "I saw James today," one soldier wrote home. "He wore gray. I wore blue. We pretended not to know each other. But here's what tears at your soul. They all thought it would be quick, a few months, maybe a summer. They thought they'd come home, laugh about their differences, and rebuild. 4 years later, 600,000 Americans were dead. Entire family lines erased. Brothers who'd never reconcile because one or both lay in unmarked graves." The Battle of Philippi, June 1861. Early in the war, men still thought war was glorious. Wesley Culp from Virginia found himself aiming across the battlefield. Through the smoke, he saw a familiar face. His brother, Henry, fighting for the Union. What do you do in that moment? When everything you've been taught about duty collides with everything you've been taught about family? Wesley lowered his rifle. He couldn't do it, but thousands of others did. At Antietam, the bloodiest single day in American history, the 1st Maryland Infantry, Confederate, fought the 1st Maryland Infantry, Union. Neighbors killing neighbors, friends killing friends. The same men who'd grown up on the same streets of Baltimore, now trying to destroy each other in a cornfield. You want to know what haunts me about this war? It's not the strategy or the politics, it's the letters. Mother, I saw William at Shiloh. He was with the Yankees. I had him in my sights. I thank God my rifle misfired. This from a Confederate soldier who spent the rest of the war wondering if his brother would show him the same mercy. The Todds of Kentucky. Mary Lincoln's family. Her brother Sam died fighting for the Confederacy at Shiloh. Her brother David died at Vicksburg. Her brother Alec at Baton Rouge. All rebels. All enemies of her husband's cause. The First Lady of the United States. Mourning. Men who'd tried to destroy the United States. How do you reconcile that? How do you grieve for someone fighting everything you believe in? Prison camps became reunion sites of the damned. Andersonville. Camp Douglas. Brothers finding each other through prison bars. One a guard, one a prisoner. The lucky ones could slip extra food, maybe a blanket. The unlucky ones had to watch their brother starve, powerless to help without committing treason. There's a photograph from 1863. Two men in different uniforms sitting side by side, brothers on leave who met in secret. They risked court-martial for that picture. It's the only image their mother had of both her sons together during the war. By 1864, one was dead. Major Sullivan Ballou wrote to his wife before First Bull Run. You've probably heard his words. Sarah, my love for you is deathless. But here's what most don't know. His brother-in-law fought for the Confederacy. If Sullivan had survived that battle, he might have faced his wife's brother across another field. The Civil War created impossible choices. In Tennessee, Andrew Johnson, future president, stayed loyal to the Union while his sons-in-law joined the Confederacy. Family dinners became impossible. How do you break bread with someone you've branded a traitor? You know what's worse than dying in war? Surviving it. Coming home to empty chairs. To family members who won't speak to you. To brothers who cross the street to avoid you. The shooting stopped in 1865, but the war continued in countless homes for generations. Benjamin Hardin Helm, Confederate general, married to Mary Lincoln's half-sister. When he died at Chickamauga, Lincoln wept openly. The President of the United States, mourning an enemy general. His advisors were horrified. The public was outraged. But Lincoln understood what they didn't. The war wasn't just about preserving the Union. It was about losing family. I feel as David of old did when told of the death of Absalom, Lincoln said. A father's grief for a rebellious son. That's what this war was, a family destroying itself. James and Alexander Campbell, brothers from Missouri. James rode with Quantrill's raiders, some of the most vicious Confederate guerrillas. Alexander joined the Union cavalry tasked with hunting down those same raiders. For 2 years, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse across Missouri, each knowing that success meant the other's death. They finally met at the Battle of Centralia. Chaos, smoke, screaming horses, dying men, and through it all, 2 brothers hunting each other. Alexander saw James first, had him dead to rights. 1 shot and the war would be over for his brother. He couldn't pull the trigger. That hesitation cost him. James's bullet found him instead. Alexander died in the mud of Missouri, killed by the brother he couldn't kill. Winchester, Virginia changed hands 72 times during the war. Families there learned to survive by hedging their bets, sons in both armies, daughters nursing both blue and gray. But survival came at a price. Rebecca Wright had brothers in both armies. She passed information to the Union while caring for Confederate wounded. When the Confederates discovered her activities, they called her a traitor. When the Union discovered she had rebel brothers, they called her suspect. She belonged nowhere. She was trusted by no one. This was the reality for thousands of families in divided territories. The story of the Terrell brothers haunts me most. William and James from Virginia, both West Point graduates, both brilliant officers. When war came, William stayed with the Union. James went with Virginia. Their father disowned William. Their mother begged them to desert, to run away together to Mexico. They refused. At Manassas, they nearly met in battle. At Antietam, they definitely saw each other across the killing fields. Neither would yield. Neither would bend. Honor, they called it. Duty. But what honor is there in killing your brother? William became the youngest Union general. James matched his rise in Confederate ranks. They became symbols of the divided nation. Newspapers wrote about them. Soldiers whispered their story around campfires. Two brothers, equally matched, destined to face each other. The confrontation everyone expected never came. James died at Bethesda Church in 1864. A Union soldier, not knowing who he was, held him as he died. His last words? "Tell my mother I died thinking of her." William never got to reconcile, never got to say goodbye. He died later that year at Winchester. Some say he sought death after James fell. The Terrell family line ended with the war. No reconciliation, no forgiveness. Just two graves and a mother who outlived both her sons. Prison camps held their own tragedies. At Johnson's Island, a Union officer recognized a dying Confederate prisoner as his younger brother. He held him through the night, risking typhus and his commission. "I couldn't let him die alone," he wrote. "Politics be damned." Letters from the front reveal the human cost. "I write to you not knowing if you'll receive this or if you still consider me your son." This from a Union soldier to his Confederate father. The mail still ran between enemy lines. Families could communicate. But what do you say to someone you might kill tomorrow? Mary Bowser, born into slavery, became one of the Union's best spies. She worked in Jefferson Davis's own home. But here's the complexity. She grew up alongside the Davis children. They'd played together as children, before the world taught them they were supposed to be different. Now she betrayed the only family she'd known for a cause greater than family itself. The Battle of Franklin, November 1864. The Carter family huddled in their basement while the battle raged literally through their home. Their son, Todd, fought with the Confederates. Another son had already died for the Union. When the battle ended, they found Todd on their own doorstep. He'd made it home, only to die where he'd been born. You see these grand paintings of civil, war battles, ordered lines, clear divisions. But the reality? Chaos, smoke, men fighting hand to hand who might have known each other. At Gettysburg, the 7th West Virginia Union charged directly into the 7th Virginia Confederate. Same towns, same families, different flags. "We are coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more." They sang this in the North, but each of those 300,000 had a family, had brothers, fathers, sons who might be marching south at the same moment. The mathematics of war meant that somewhere, in some battle, family would meet family. The women suffered uniquely. They couldn't fight, but they bore the weight of divided loyalties. Sarah Edmonds disguised herself as a man to fight for the Union. Her brother fought for the Confederacy. They passed each other once during a prisoner exchange. He didn't recognize her. She didn't reveal herself. What could she say? "Brother, it's me and I'm your enemy." Battlefield medicine was primitive. Men lay wounded for days, and sometimes in the dark enemies helped each other. Confederate and Union soldiers sharing water, binding wounds, until the sun rose and made them enemies again. How many discovered they were helping their own kin? Guerrilla warfare in Missouri and Kansas made the family divisions even more brutal. No uniforms, no clear battle lines, just neighbors raiding neighbors. The younger brothers rode with Confederate raiders while their cousins hunted them for the Union. Christmas 1863, they accidentally met at their grandmother's farm. Guns were drawn. The old woman stepped between them. "Not in my home," she said. They ate together in silence, then left to resume killing each other. The draft made things worse. Rich men could buy substitutes. Poor families had to send their sons, sometimes all their sons. The Cromwell family of New York sent 7 sons to war, 4 to the Union, 3 to the Confederacy. Only 2 came home, both Union. They never spoke of their brothers again. The silence was its own kind of death. Sherman's march to the sea, total war. But for many of his soldiers, they were burning the homes of distant cousins, destroying the farms of family friends. War is hell, Sherman said, but he didn't mention that sometimes hell meant torching your aunt's plantation or arresting your brother-in-law. Intelligence networks often ran through families. Women especially used their divided loyalties to move information. Rose O'Neill, greenhouse spied for the Confederacy while her sister supported the Union. They used their family connections to pass intelligence, each betraying the other's cause. When Rose drowned trying to run the blockade, her sister mourned privately. Publicly, she celebrated a traitor's death, the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. A Union soldier captured a Confederate courier. Going through his papers, he found a letter from his own mother. The courier was his brother. They hadn't seen each other in 2 years. The Union soldier faced a choice: turn in the intelligence and condemn his brother, or commit treason himself. He chose duty. His brother was executed. He never went home again. Desertion rates climbed as the war dragged on. Men who'd enlisted in glory now faced the reality of killing countrymen, maybe kinsmen. The Confederate Army lost whole units to desertion in the final year, men walking home to families that might not welcome them. Union or Confederate, deserters faced the same fate: disgrace at best, execution at worst. By 1864, the romance of war was dead. Grant's Overland Campaign was a meat grinder: Cold Harbor, the Wilderness, Spotsylvania. Men fought in trenches foreshadowing World War I. And in those trenches, separated sometimes by mere yards, brothers could hear each other's voices. "Johnny Reb," the Union soldiers would call. "What do you want? Billy Yank? Got any tobacco to trade?" These truces were forbidden but common. Men who'd been trying to kill each other would meet between the lines, trade coffee for tobacco, northern newspapers for southern letters, and sometimes, just sometimes, they'd ask about family. "You know a James Morrison from Culpeper County?" "That's my cousin. He dead?" "Wounded at Chancellorsville. Lost his leg but alive, last I heard." The final year brought desperation. Confederate armies melted away. Union forces pressed relentlessly. Families that had sent sons to both sides now prayed simply for anyone to come home. The grand causes, Union, states' rights, slavery, freedom, meant less than empty beds and unplowed fields. Richmond fell in April 1865. Jefferson Davis fled. In the chaos, Union soldiers entered the Confederate capital. Among them was Charles Douglas, son of Frederick Douglass. His unit liberated slaves, including some who shared his father's former master. The ironies of war, the complexities of freedom, black soldiers freeing those who might have been their own kin, had slavery not scattered families like seeds in the wind. Appomattox. Lee's surrender. The Army of Northern Virginia stacked its arms. Men wept openly, not just for the cause lost, but for what came next. How do you go home when home chose the other side? How do you rebuild when half your family is gone? The Union soldiers were ordered not to celebrate. Grant understood. These weren't foreign enemies. They were Americans. Brothers. Cousins. Future. Neighbors again. "The war is over," he said. "The rebels are our countrymen again. But how long does it take for enemies to become countrymen? How long before brothers could be brothers again?" April 14, 1865. Lincoln is assassinated. The joy of victory turns to ash. And here's the cruel irony. John Wilkes Booth's brother, Edwin, was Lincoln's favorite actor. Edwin had voted for Lincoln, supported the Union. Now he bore the shame of his brother's deed. He couldn't perform for months. Audiences wouldn't accept a Booth on stage. One brother's action destroyed another brother's life. The aftermath was sometimes worse than the war. Soldiers came home to find their farms destroyed, their families scattered. The bitterness ran deep. In Tennessee, Union veterans wouldn't speak to Confederate veterans. In Maryland, families that had split during the war never reconciled. Churches divided, communities fractured. The shooting stopped, but the war continued. Reconstruction brought new conflicts: carpetbaggers and scalawags, night riders and Union leagues. The Ku Klux Klan rose from Confederate veterans who couldn't accept defeat. Union soldiers formed their own groups, and caught in the middle were families still trying to heal from sending sons to both armies. Nathan Bedford Forrest, Confederate, general and early KKK leader, had cousins who'd fought for the Union. One became a Reconstruction judge. They'd grown up together, fought on opposite sides, and now faced each other again in a different kind of war. The violence of Reconstruction often followed family lines drawn during the war. Here's a story that breaks my heart. The Ridgway brothers, from Georgia. One fought for the Union, one for the Confederacy. Both survived. When the Union brother came home in 1866, the town turned against him, called him a traitor. His Confederate brother stood by him, said they'd both served honorably. The town turned on both of them. They left Georgia together, moved west, never to return. The war had made them enemies. The peace made them exiles. Veterans. Reunions became healing grounds. By the 1880s, old men in blue and gray met at battlefields. They'd walk the ground where they'd tried to kill each other, share memories. Sometimes they'd find the men they'd faced. You were behind that stone wall. You charged across that field. And sometimes, you killed my brother. He killed mine. What do you say then? How do you forgive? How do you forget? The last Civil War veteran died in 1956, Albert Wilson. He'd been a drummer boy for the Union. He lived long enough to see 2 world wars, the atomic bomb, the beginning of the space age. But he never forgot the war that divided America. In his final interview, he didn't talk about battles or glory. He talked about friends he'd lost, families destroyed, a nation that tore itself apart. We tell ourselves the Civil War was about preserving the Union, about ending slavery, about states' rights. All true. But it was also about something more personal, more painful. It was about choosing between blood and belief, between family and cause, between the brother you loved and the uniform you wore. Today, we see the Civil War through the soft focus of history, blue and gray, north and south, right and wrong. But for those who lived it, the lines weren't clear. The choices weren't simple. Every battle was somebody's hometown. Every casualty was somebody's son. Every victory came at the cost of American blood. You carry their legacy. Yes, you. Every American carries the DNA of a nation that survived its own suicide attempt. We are the children of those who chose sides, who chose to fight, who chose to forgive, or couldn't. The next time you see a Civil War monument, don't just read the names. Think about the families those names represent. The mothers who lost sons, to both sides. The brothers who never reconciled. The communities that took generations to heal. Some never did. This is the ultimate tragedy of the Civil War. Not that brother fought brother, but that some brothers never stopped fighting. The guns fell silent in 1865. But in too many hearts, the war never ended. In too many families, the divisions never healed. In too many communities, the wounds still fester. What can we learn from this? That ideology can divide blood, that war makes enemies of brothers, that some wounds time doesn't heal, but also this, that reconciliation is possible, that forgiveness can triumph over hate, that a nation, like a family, can emerge from its darkest hour stronger, different, scarred, but whole. Remember them. The divided families, the impossible choices, the prices paid not just in blood, but in bonds broken forever. This is their legacy. This is your inheritance. A nation that survived when families couldn't. A union preserved at the cost of unions, destroyed. We are all children of that war. We are all heirs to both its glory and its grief. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, Share your own family's Civil War story in the comments below. Because every American family was touched by this war. Every family has its own story of division and hopefully reconciliation. This channel exists to remember that history isn't made by nameless masses. It's made by individuals, by families, by brothers who chose different paths, and a nation that somehow survived the choosing.